All right, welcome. So, hi everyone. My name is Greg Gerhardt. I'm Deputy Director of the Office of Information Management and Analysis at the State Water Board. I have a background in water resource engineering from Humboldt State University. I've worked at the water boards for 26 years. That's my quick bio. That's as an example. I'm here because I call the office that I work in my role as the Chief Data Liberator at the water boards. So, and we have a lot of data to be liberated and turned into useful information. So I want to welcome you all here and thank you for coming. And I'd like to recognize the coach manager team first. And so first I'd like to acknowledge Rasik Hussain and the work that he's done. Rasik is an executive fellow. He comes from the Sac State Executive Fellowship Program, and he has an undergrad degree in history from UCLA. And he's been great and a huge help on this, so thank you, Rasik. And then to his right, Michelle Tang is in the Office of Information Management Analysis. She's an environmental scientist / data scientist. One of these literal explicit efforts that we're trying to do to build our workforce. So she is actually going through a curriculum that we're sponsoring at the Water Board to help her build data science skills within her environmental science job. And to her right is Rafael Maestu. Rafa is an economist and chief data scientist and a water expert. He has been at the Water Board almost as long as I have, but knows a lot more. And he is essentially he's our chief data scientist in the sense that he is helping engage on all things open data and does a lot of data visualizations. And you'll hear from him later. And then who else do we have on the coaches team? Brent Vanderberg. So Brent Vanderberg is with the Division of Water Rights. He's also kind of a special forces data science person within that division that's been helping on a lot of projects throughout the whole organization. Brent is a geologist, is that right?
That's right.
From Fresno office originally.
Born in Fresno, worked there for a while too.
Yep. Fresburg, as they call it. And then Drew Hill. Andrew is a Sea Grant Fellow from 2 years ago that helped build a lot of the capacity that we already have and continues to support us out of the Division of Water Rights. He is now an environmental scientist on board at the Water Board. Another good example of data science equals jobs. So who am I missing here? Good, okay. So with that, I'd like to start the self-introductions of the data management innovation team first. And this is a huge honor. So first of all, thank you guys for applying. We had 26 applications for 6 positions originally, and we expanded it to 8 to make sure that we got a good selection of all the awesome apps that we saw. All of them were great. We want to make use of all of those people and their skills and resources, but welcome to the 8 that are here. And I'll start with Lance, Dr. Lay.
I'm Lance Lay. I work at the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board in the Basin Planning Units. My main focus currently there is developing a climate change adaptation strategy through various data science means.
Thanks, Lance. Hi, I'm TJ at Region 6 in the Cannabis Regulatory Unit and kind of at the end of the table.
We might want to use the wireless on the ends.
Thank you. All right, TJ in Region 6 in the Cannabis Regulatory Unit. So I've been kind of one of the veterans of the cannabis program, which means I've been around for a year and a half. And just kind of trying to build the program up and dealing with our own data needs.
Thanks. Andrew Hamilton, just new to the water board, last 8 months. And my background is chemistry, so data. And I've been working on the ELAP regs right now and 12 years in the environmental chemistry industry.
I'm Jeff Yazell. I'm a senior engineer in the water rights enforcement section, and I pretty much do all the data sciencey things for that section right now.
I'm Jacob Kaplan with the Water Quality Assessment Unit, and I work on the 303D list.
Hi, my name is Carmina Padgett, and I'm an engineer in the Division of Water Rights.
Will Anderson. I'm a water resource control engineer in water rights. work on assessing water supply, measured and estimated, comparing that to demand, and trying to digest that into a cohesive picture.
And we have Christina Humphreys on the line, participating remotely from Los Angeles. Christina is I think she's an engineer, but she works in the cleanup program at the Los Angeles Board. She has a background with EPA, working with Equisystems, and does a lot of work of integrating data into GeoTracker from some of these other groundwater sources of data. So she's joining us on the line. She joined us in a phone call earlier today, and that's the 8th member, I think, of the team. So why don't we start with the Data Science Advisory Panel. In a minute, I'll explain why we have 3 different functioning units, but for now, let's just have the first. Who would be the first? Meredith. Thank you for joining, by the way. Hi, Meredith.
Green. All right. It's not a blue and gold microphone, so I don't really know what to do with this. Just kidding.
Wait,
those
Stanford,
who know that I spent 13 years at Stanford realize that I'm perfectly good with red as well. Hi, my name is Meredith. I'm the executive director of the West Big Data Innovation Hub, which is one of 4 regional big data innovation hubs that was funded by the National Science Foundation to support data science partnerships for social impact. We've had the pleasure of working with the water boards, with DWR, with OPR, all sorts of acronyms to support the California Safe Drinking Water Data Challenge. And personally, some of my fondest memories have been in cohorts like this, which were voluntary. And so we're really excited to meet you all and see how we can help.
Hi, I'm Glenn Lowe from the Earth Genome. We're an environmental data nonprofit. We essentially build water data tools for water authorities, companies, Levi's, Dow, Coca-Cola.
Jonathan Cruz, I'm the manager of financial planning at Molten Water District, and I oversee our data team.
Hi, I'm Monabina Mukerji. I'm Senior Water Resources Analyst at Molten Water District, and I help the Water Resources and Finance Department with data models and making decisions with the help of data.
Drew? Nice try on trying to dodge it, though.
Drew Atwater. I work at Molten Water District. We've been pioneering kind of an internal data science team to help support our finance and analytics across the organization. And then we have, I think, 2 other panelists that couldn't make it. Help me out here, sorry. I know we have Forrest Melton from NASA. He's unavailable to meet us today, but we're having a follow-up meeting with him. And the other one that I can think of is Dr. Jeff Horsberg from Utah State University, who teaches in their engineering department, but he specializes in water cyber informatics. So just being able to say that in this day and age, or for me to even be able to pronounce those words, is pretty exciting. So Dr. Horsberg and Forrest will be joining us at a second meeting. Am I missing one? Okay, awesome. So how about the people in the audience? Let's start with the people at the table here. Just say who you are. Yeah, just real quick.
I think I'm the only audience at the table, but so I'm Fiona Sanchez, and I'm the Director of Water Resources for Irvine Ranch Water District, and I started my career there as an analyst, and I'm actually up here for other meetings, so I do have to leave a little early, but I heard this was happening, and I couldn't resist.
Okay, cool. Glad to have you. George, over here, and then we'll start. And
I'm George Isaac with the Delta Stewardship Council, and I help out with the Assembly Bill 1755 and also with the internal agency.
George Isaac with the Delta Stewardship Council, Special Forces Open Data. Is that okay? Just for the people on the web broadcast.
Hi, my name is Anna Holder. I am a new California Sea Grant Fellow with the Water Board, and today's my second day, so I'm learning all sorts of stuff.
And I'm Allie Dunn with the Surface Water Ambient Monitoring Program, which is in OEMA in Greg's Camp.
Brian Moore, Cannabis Regulatory Unit.
All right, well, thanks, everyone. So I'm going to give an overview of where we're at, who we are, the water boards, why you're here, why we gathered this group, a little bit of a talk about the structure. We have an agenda that includes, at some point, we're going to go into the mechanics of how the team and the panel and the coaches are going to actually do work on projects. And then we're going to open it up for a facilitated discussion near the end. So that's a quick rundown of the run of show. Any feedback or questions about things before I get started? Great. Okay, so I'm going to be running a slideshow, so if you want to turn around, I won't be offended if you're not looking at me while I talk. So this slide deck is one that we use a lot to talk about what we do at the Office of Information Management Analysis. So I won't go through the whole slideshow, but I'll make it available because it has lots of links to lots of things. So a quick rundown of who we are. The water boards are a pretty unique organization in the world, I would say. Within California government, we're also pretty unique. We have a 10-board organization. We have 68 governor-appointed people in charge of our water throughout the state. The shaded polygons are the regional boards. We also have district drinking water district offices and districts that sort of overlap and confuse people all the time. But the bottom line is at the top, we have 68 governor-appointed positions. We also have, each one of those has an executive team. So there's 1 to 5, in some cases, executives at each one of these regions. At the state board, there's 13 divisions and offices. And we are also unique in the sense that with charge of water regulatory, we have all of the main topics. We have drinking water, water rights, water quality. We provide funding too. So we have a significant overlay in California when it comes to water. Some more quick stats or numbers, if you will. So 43 locations, 18 drinking water offices. We have over 150 programs. I've been corrected on that number. That seems over the top to me, but I think it's probably right. We have about 2,100 positions at the water board. My office has about 28 positions for context. The operating budget is huge. We have lots of different enterprise applications that we call databases, in which we mostly use them to track these people that we regulate or give money to or take money from. And so there's lots and lots of regulatory data. A quick sort of explanation of who we are is that we built our databases. We started building about 15 plus years ago, our big enterprise systems. And it was primarily because we were shifting to a fee-based organization at the time. We were weaning off of the general fund like a lot of state agencies. And we needed quickly a way to have both a justification for what the positions and the fees needed to be, but as well as a way to track and invoice and to, in some cases, drive better decisions. So one of the reasons that we're here talking is because the state of California adopted a statute called the Open and Transparent Water Data Act. This is also called AB 1755. And when this came along, we actually had started doing open data prior to this. I came into the office about a year ahead of this, a year plus, and I pitched the job on the idea that we should be doing open data. And they liked it. I got the job, and we started working on it, and then along came this legislation. And the legislation put the responsibility in the hands of the Department of Water Resources to kind of coordinate 3 other agencies, including not the Delta Stewardship Council, but the Water Quality Monitoring Council, the water boards, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and by sort of ancillary connections organizations like the Delta Stewardship Council and the Coastal Commission and other partners that are working with us. So, but the named agencies are supposed to be essentially doing some steps, and the big step is coming up in September, and it's essentially we should be publishing our water data on September 2019. And then also along the way, my office, we've tried to find different ways to engage with the organization. Our IT projects are all on their own tracks, and they all have lots of customers and stakeholders already involved, so it was kind of hard for us to engage with all the different IT projects at the organization. It was also really hard to, at one point we tried to do data management planning and get people to give us their data management plans, but that was just another step in their way to get something done, and it wasn't mandated. So what we decided was we wanted to make sure that there was a executive buy-in to this. So we started having conversations which resulted in the resolution that's linked and described up there. The resolution was made by State Water Board, so it really only applies to the State Water Board, but by nature, it kind of reaches out and touches all the regional board programs as well. And it really does a couple of things. It's kind of a mom and apple pie principles resolution in many ways. It talks about open data, data management principles, how to engage with the public on our data, et cetera, et cetera. And then the next thing it really does is it establishes a path for why we're here today, which is the data management strategy and the evaluation of data readiness that was asked for by that resolution. So for some audiences, and it's important to talk about what is open data. So I have a slide here that just kind of describes, this is one definition off of the internet. Most of them are all pretty similar, but some of the key things I like about this one is that it's got some granular details about timeliness and what happens after post-release. But basically, one of the first principles is public openness. It's free. Essentially, you can't really charge for data and call it open data. Accessible has lots of meanings, but in this context, it's mostly machine readable and available through machine-to-machine connections, so APIs and web services and what have you. It's also a structural thing. It doesn't have to be a flat tabular file, but in many cases, that is what accessibility means. And it's also described. Open data has documentation, so it has metadata. Metadata can include, or it can be separate, described as dictionary. So defined fields. So somebody who's using your data knows what fac_ID actually means instead of having to guess. And then reusable, meaning it can be used in sort of common licenses. And then it's complete, meaning it's got what people need to do their jobs. And that's where the civic engagement path comes in. It's timely, it's refreshed at some frequency that's useful for the audiences and the users of it. And then it has some sort of steward and management sustainability component. So you have, after the first publishing, you have some way to connect back to who's in charge of it and how much support do they provide to it post-release. So some of the principles that are in that resolution, they're not exactly written this way, I don't think, but this is a more easy way to describe it. So first is this idea of open first, and data must be accessible. We have that. We also have a new state policy for open data that applies to all state agencies. It's a fascinating read if you haven't looked at it, but it basically reinforces this. The next principle is that we have good data quality management systems, and quality is something that we talk about throughout the whole organization. And so this is one of the most important elements of this. We had a conversation yesterday with our executives about the data quality from one of our databases, and so we're starting that conversation. But as I like to say in a metaphor, if we were making toothbrushes, every part of the organization would have a role to play in quality management, just because we've sort of we put quality into this sort of laboratory bucket in the past where people say, oh, that's something that the labs do or that those chemists, those crazy chemists won't look at. Nobody else should really have to worry about that, right? And so we're trying to change that conversation with this resolution so that people who write permits know why they're putting requirements in there. There's a quality system applicability to everything we do here at the Water Board, give money out, et cetera, et cetera. Data literacy is an important concept. We have an ongoing need. It's never going to change, and it's never really, it's not new. It's always been here, and this applies to every level of the organization. We have some tools that I'll describe at some point to assess people quickly. So like teams like this, we could throw an online assessment tool at them and get a quick sense of what kind of content maybe people needed, whether it's statistical principles training or data structure or data visualization kind of elements, or even storytelling falls into this category for us. So some of our team, our executives and others might only get an overview of some of those things and then go deep on storytelling. And then likewise, some of the staff may not be involved in much of the storytelling, but they really have to go deep on Python and statistics and things like that. Use our data to govern and govern with our data, or govern our data. So these are both sort of flips of the word, but one is really about making sure that we use data in our decisions to the extent we can. As I like to say, we're not bound to using data in all of our decisions. We are happy to make decisions at the Water Board with or without data. And so one of the things is about synchronizing that, as well as changing the culture a little bit so that it's willing to pause a day or a week or maybe even longer to sort of see if the data can arrive and inform that decision a little bit differently or better. And then the other part of that equation is governing our data itself, like treating it as we should for a key business resource. So we have a lot of different policies right now about approving IT projects and ensuring security for our data, but we don't really govern, we don't have a whole strategy to govern our data. So that's one of the key elements and principles of this. So the resolution asked for us to develop this data management strategy and to bring it back in March. So we're counting a checkbox for this event. Thank you very much. We're here in March talking about it. But we have a lot of work to do still. And one of the things that we did was we decided to do this readiness evaluation part. We would conduct interviews. So Rasik and I sort of brainstormed at the org chart for the State Water Board, and we identified 140 different people that we wanted to talk to. So Rafa, why don't you take over from here and talk about some of the insights, including, at one point I had a slide of,
So we think we understood how we manage data at the water boards. We have a preconceived idea or understanding, but we want to make sure that we were right. So we went to the managers and the supervisors, asking them 5 different questions, like how do you use data in your business, how you make decisions with data. Also, we asked them what kind of skills do you have or do your staff have to analyze and use this data, and what databases do you use? What are the sources of the data? And we also ask about their quality procedures. How do we ensure that the data is of high quality or value they can actually be useful? And we actually, the final question was, is the data public information? And if it's not public, why is not public? What are the obstacles for releasing these data sets? So we interviewed, like Greg said, we had 140 at the beginning. We selected 116 for different divisions. We had the Division of Water Rights on the far left, and then Division of Water Quality, Division of Administrative Services, Division of Drinking Water, Division of Financial Assistance, Office of Enforcement, Division of Information Technology, Office of Information Management, Office of Research Planning and Performance, Office of Information Management Analysis, and the Delta Water Masters. The blue is the ones who have been completed, and the orange are the ones that are still pending. We are leaving OIMA, ORPP, and the Division of Information Technology for last, for good reasons, because they are supposed to be the ones managing the databases itself, not the data, but the databases. And we have gained a few insights out of it. First of all, as Greg said, why do we have these databases? The databases were built, in most cases, to collect fees. And that was the original intent of the use of the data. There was also use for tracking violations and enforcement actions because we had to report data to EPA. So it was mandatory reporting, first to EPA, but also to the legislature. That's the reason why we had these databases. To track the cleanup programs, which we were moving a lot of money. We were paying a lot of money in the cleanup programs. But those were the original reasons why we built this system. So we have a very complex systems. I don't know if you have a slide, Greg, for that, showing Greg is going to talk about that later. But then the way the system, we try to use them for other things, like we for the performance report, to set priorities, to allocate resources, to be able to demonstrate results to the public and the stakeholders. So through these interviews that we have with the supervisors and managers about the use of data, we found some commonalities. There's some common issues. First of all, is that we all use data. Every single person in the organization uses data different way, but everybody is involved with data management. That was actually surprising in a way, because you would think, somebody working in accounting, they don't really use data. Well, you think about it, that's what they do. They use data, but they don't see themselves as a data managers. When we do inspections, we are creating data. We are collecting information that is going to be stored somewhere that's going to be used later. So, but in a lot of cases, the data is not used. There's no use of this data directly. So we may be tracking inspections, but nobody's using that data later to explain what are the compliance rates based on the inspections, for example, to answer questions. It's data in, but not data out. The other finding is that in a lot of cases, we're still using old technology. We're using Excel, spreadsheets, even paper. It's a lot of data is still stored in papers. So we are not taking advantage, using the advantage of the new technology, the opportunities that we have today that didn't exist 4 years ago. So all this, there's also that the data is in silos, that is not integrated, that everybody's been building these systems in different formats, they don't speak to each other, and they build them for different reasons. So even though they are measuring the same thing, like water chemistry, because it's groundwater or surface water or drinking water, they have a completely different schema and data dictionaries, and the data is not, there's no interoperability. And that's a huge issue for making the data more useful and used. And in the end, in a lot of cases, the data is just not open. We may have reports, public reports, but that's information, that's not the data. In a lot of cases, we are not letting the public or the stakeholders to do their own analysis, to do use the raw data to come up with their own conclusions. And the reason why it's not open is not legally. There's no reason why we should not be able to release this data. It's because technically we have not built the reports or we have not made it available. But there's no legal limitations for us to release these data sets. You want to go through this, Greg?
I was just using this slide as an example. This is a crude, quick visualization of the fee connection to our different databases. So every one of the fee codes is a count in the bar chart, and then on the pie, you can see the different main databases. There's a significant number of our fees that don't have any data connected to them, or they're a flat fee. So that's the none category. And then SWRCB is our drinking water system, which is a group of things. And in many cases, the data isn't actually in that. It's in the electronic annual report, but we just called it SWRCB. And then some of this stuff is coming out of CWICs and SMARTS and connects back to the fee codes. And then a lot of the water rights is using different elements of the water rights database called ERIMS. So you can also see by program along the bottom that some have more and some have less connections to databases. This is something that I was familiar with in my old job at the stormwater program. There was regular conversations with what kinds of metric or what kind of drivers, variables do you anticipate coming in the permit reissuance that would be useful for fees. So for example, the idea of driving facilities to do less land disturbance by charging them per acre of land disturbance. So, you know, that's one of the examples in the construction stormwater case. They actually use that. And I think acreage of exposure and the industrial permit is a similar driver that they're trying to use the fees and to be partners with the regulatory program. So this is a beginning of a project. Rosik and I have been sort of working on this, but it has the potential to really go deep because there's, as you can imagine, there's revenues associated with each one of these. There's also database field codes and other sort of data quality issues. The insight that was really gained by this is that this data is actually really well used and alive because of that. There's a year-long process that our fee unit goes through that was a fascinating sort of business view. We adopt emergency regulations every year that are called our fees. And to do that, they start projecting with the January budget released by the governor's office of what kinds of numbers are we going to need to do. They also start having conversations with stakeholders. We have new programs that come in, like the cannabis program and others, where we suddenly have to sort of make sure that we're bringing in enough revenue to pay for the positions that we have. This is one of the sort of downsides, I guess you would say, about going to a fee-based business model. But then as May Revise comes along, they start refining their process, and then ultimately they start doing stakeholder outreach about now, actually. And so when the May Revise comes out, they're getting closer and closer, and then they do a final data pull right before they send invoices out. And so this has to be right. One of the things that they sort of hate, and they really strive to never have happen, is to send an invoice to the wrong person or have the wrong value in there because the data said they have 5,000 acres when it was only 5 acres or something like that. So it's a really interesting insight into the organization. It's a teaching point for the rest of the organization of if you use the data, then you actually start getting more robust data quality. So Rafa, I think I was going to have you talk about the inventory too. So you identified a bunch of data sets in these interviews.
Yeah, so we already identified 120 data sets, and these are really the high-level data sets. How did we do it? So we started with databases. And databases, you can generate some kind of data pools. You can structure the data multiple different ways. Like, for example, for the water rights program, we identify like 15 data sets. You look at the same data different ways. You want to show it as like in flat files. But each one of those data sets have data elements. And the data elements had to have data definitions and vocabulary and valid values, and it has to be described, and it has to put in context on how that data is collected and everything else. And that really is one of the challenges, because if we want to make data open and useful and used, it has to be well documented. And believe it or not, a lot of these databases don't really have a data dictionary associated with them. So we need to look at we need to talk to the programs, and this is one of the things that the innovation team can help us with. Look at the data in how the program is actually using those values, and what do they mean. And what we also see is that some of these databases, they're almost ready, like water rights and SWRCB, the data in the water quality regulatory programs. We have enough flat files that we can actually use to start making the data available to the public in this flat format, which is just like huge, long files with a lot of columns, and you can associate everything possible with it. We think those are going to be really, really useful for the public and for the users. And again, we have a deadline. We have a serious deadline, which is September 2019. And I don't know if we're going to be able to release the 120 data sets, but at the minimum, we're going to release these high-level, high-priority data sets.
Thanks. Yeah, so that was my punchline, too, is that this is a great example of where the team can help us. Some of this work is actually just work that somebody needs to help us structure these data sets. They need to kind of curate, learn the publishing protocols, and put the metadata into the right format on the open data portal and things like that. So these are opportunities. We're not saying that's what you will do, but we're starting to get into this part of the presentation where we're looking for actual, like keyboards on the ground, or whatever the right metaphor is, to get the team and the panel and the other people excited about projects. And so with that in mind, I'm going to transition a little bit. We're going to switch the microphone, so to speak, down to the table level. So I'm going to ask Brent to maybe start off with some examples of workflow that he's been experienced with, as well as some of these opportunities. We have 2 slides of these that we brainstormed. And this is just some of the ideas of things that you guys could help us on. But let me actually, before, right as Brent's getting ready, we think there's kind of 3 basic areas of opportunities. One is, I forgot my 3. One is going to be like implementation of strategic project plans. So on a big picture, what we're writing here is a strategic plan for data management for the water boards. But it's not one of those traditional strategic plans. It has like really high-level overarching strategy, view, vision, and mission and goals and objectives. This is going to be more of a lean and mean, action-oriented strategic plan that if we'll definitely go through the goals and objectives and mission-setting process, but what we're going to jump into is a list of strategic projects that we want to start implementing that would help us make progress towards those goals and objectives. And as I have said in many meetings, we'll probably have like 50 ideas of projects that we could work on, that we could, maybe more, that we'll throw at the wall. And eventually that'll coalesce. Some of those projects will look like each other. You sort of morph one and it turns into, 3 turns into 1. Some of these projects maybe aren't really ripe after we thought about them. And so we'll compress that list down to some other number, make it up, say it's 25. And then we'll have to go through this process of ranking them. And we'll use the goals and objectives as well as the insights from the different members of the team and the panel to help us rank those, because Rafa and Rasik and the people in my shop only have a certain view of the organization. We really want to make sure that we're hitting projects that have the most bang for the buck, so to speak, across the organization and for our external stakeholders as well. So there'll be this ranking process that will go back to our executive team. We'll talk about them. We'll probably have more input from executives, and then we'll have a final strategic plan, and we'll start implementing it. And then we'll have performance measures, and this team will, again, hopefully have enough of a lifespan that it watches a little bit of that implementation and gives us feedback on that. And then at some point, there might be a tag where they tag out, this team tags out and a new team rolls in. We may or may not keep it on data management, but one of the real goals of building this innovation team was, it was actually an inspiration by a presentation by June Lopez and Henry from East Bay Mud. What's Henry's last name? Anyone know? Sorry, sorry, Henry, on the internet. But it was a presentation at last year's Innovation Summit that Imagine H2O runs. And they both sort of gave me these windows of how they've done innovation within their organizations. And so this is a mimic of that. And so you guys are the inaugural innovation team on the topic of data management, but hopefully this lives on over the lives of your careers and et cetera, and it changes every year. It might be a web interface managed innovation team. It might be a staff motivation and training innovation team. There's all sorts of potential topics to innovate at the Water Board. So that's really what we're trying to do, is pilot that too. But so one of those project ideas categories is going to be actually helping us on the strategic projects, because that's a big part of what's coming out of this. The literacy projects that we're going to do, the data science projects that we're going to do. Then another thing is going to be more boots on the ground kind of a thing for you too, where we want intersection between your work. We want you to bring your own projects to this. And this is kind of what we're going to do now, is Brent's going to go through some of the examples of things that he works on that might be overlap potential areas for one of you or more of you to join. Michelle's going to go through some of her data literacy and web projects as well, web visualization, and then Rafa's going to talk about some of the work that he's been involved in. And so we'll do this relatively informally, and I hope that if you guys have questions or you want to check in, feel free to just ask, raise your hand or whatever, break in.
Thank you, Greg. So I have the honor of using about 5 minutes to talk to you about two projects I've been working on for years. So I'll do my best here. The idea is just go over what these projects are, go over some of the players that we have involved with them, the different roles, and then try to tie some of those roles really quickly to some of these bullet points that are on the slides right here. So I've been working on two innovative projects over the last few years, 2 or 3 years. One is called GEARS, the Groundwater Extraction Analysis and Reporting System. This will be the software that the State Water Board uses to help implement the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Another piece of software we've been working on is called OpenET. This will be a publicly available web platform for looking at evapotranspiration or consumptive water use across the entire Western United States. So I wanted to talk about these two projects specifically because there's some common things and some differences about them. We'll start with GEARS. So with GEARS, we had to innovate a piece of software in a pure government scenario, meaning we had to work with a private contractor to develop custom software within the state government. This is very different than developing software in the private industry or in, say, like a water district or an NGO or something. There's some limitations with government. So right off the bat, we knew we had to scope GEARS accurately. So we walked in to this thing basically blind and began to talk to advisors around the state of California, personal people that we knew from our past, looking at what does it mean to develop business requirements. And that was critical because in order to get through government software, you have to get through the stage gate or the project approval lifecycle. So by educating ourselves in this way, we looked at one of the first important team members of an innovation project, which are the solution developers, the people who really look for what the need is that you're trying to fulfill, the problem that you're trying to overcome. After that, we started to head a little bit more into what you would expect with software development, a little more nerdy, a little bit more flowcharty, a lot of flowcharts. And these flowcharts describe business processes and how the software is supposed to work. That moved us into an even nerdier area of actual coding, the actual building of the software, where we saw folks that, initially I kind of thought, hey, you're a computer programmer, you build software. Well, it turns out there's front end, there's back end, some people are proficient in PHP. Well, it turns out that by the time we had GEARS stable to version 1, we had touched a whole bunch of different types of folks. It took a village to do it. And I wanted to point that out for this group because we have a heck of a village formed here across regions, different programs. So the idea is, by looking at kind of how we built GEARS, where would you fit? Where do your expertise lie? Do you want to create new expertise? A little bit of both? It's up to you. So the other project we worked on, and this one's really cool, was bigger. It wasn't pure gov. This one was humongous. 3 years ago, we sat down with the National Aeronautic and Space Administration and began to talk about the value of a full open source consumptive use platform where we could see water use at the agricultural level, both regional, statewide, or the field level, and do so in a completely cooperative kumbaya way. We were laughed at first, but eventually through stakeholder engagement, which is an important piece up here, stakeholder engagement, we ended up in a room with both NASA, folks from Netherlands, the Almond Board, anyone with interests about this project. And through communication, we began to actually work towards execution of the project. So OpenET began as an idea, through stakeholder engagement, got us to a design development point at which we began to work with Google, specifically the Earth Engine department at Google, to be the backbone for the software. We began to work with a company called Habitat 7 to do the user interface. We began to work with the Almond Board to look at the agricultural needs for the platform. We began to work with other states around the United States, all of which have something like the Water Board. It's the state water group for that state. We began to collect feedback as we were going, and little by little, the project began to form. Now, we're not done yet, but through that village, we got to something that could be huge. I think it will be. And it's exciting to talk about this right now because both GEARS and OpenET are just approaching completion. You might not hear about GEARS for another year or so. You won't hear about OpenET for another year or so, but you will. And in the same way, this cohort can help to start things that we'll hear about in years to come. So think big. This is that moonshot point. Think about those teams, what you want to contribute.
Right. Yeah, thanks. Michelle, did you want to go next? You can do it from your table or here.
Okay, hi everybody. I'll spend a couple of minutes talking about kind of our data literacy efforts and opportunities there. In OWEMA, we've only just recently, well not just recently, but we've always known that there's a great need to kind of improve the data literacy throughout the water boards. There's a lot of interest among our staff, but a lot of people don't know exactly where to start. They might have expertise in a certain area, but they want to do this. So one of the initiatives that we have that we've just started in OWEMA is to draft this training proposal for a series of workshops that kind of looks at creating data science projects from the beginning to the very end. So this would reach people who are brand new to data science, who maybe have only looked at data in spreadsheets, maybe not even that, to people who are also experts at it and who are Pythonistas, who know how to clean data, who know how to structure it, model it, do all that jazz. So part of this training proposal, right now we're the brainstorming stages. We've made some connections. But the idea so far is to have a series of 8 workshops, everything from kind of a beginning principles of data visualization course to data structuring, data cleaning, databases, data analysis, and then finally that visualization and communication aspects of it. So it's a really exciting project. Right now we're working with some collaborators at the Data Science Initiative at UC Davis. They're also very excited to be a part of it. We would like to both create this series of workshops as well as possibly create this kind of long-term partnership with the Data Science Initiative. So as Greg and Brent and many others have mentioned, there is kind of, everybody has their own kind of level of expertise and their own area of expertise. So I know some people here are fantastic at programming. Some people are very good at the communication aspect. So there's room, opportunity for all of you to kind of contribute your skills and to kind of move these projects forward. So I'll talk a little bit about a project that I've been working on that kind of speaks to some of the challenges that we've run into and some of the ways that this team can kind of help out. So my background, I do kind of a little bit of everything. I started out in GIS, did some database work, and then data visualization, and then now I'm doing more kind of web development, web applications and front-end stuff. And so one of the projects that I've been working on for about a year or so is what's called the Safe to Swim map. And it's basically a map, a web application interactive map online that pulls all of the indicator bacteria data from CEDN, maps it, displays the results in a chart, and then pulls the statewide bacteria objectives and graphs it, does that comparison basically. And so it sounds pretty simple, but actually getting to that point was very difficult just because of all of the obstacles that we ran into on the back end. So finding that very reliable, kind of high performance, efficient data flow was definitely the one thing that took the longest. So this was kind of a grassroots effort. We were able to kind of create that data flow, but it took a lot of wrangling and a lot of workarounds. And the solution that we came up with was to create a Python script, which we call the CEDN automation script, which basically pulls the data from CEDN. It actually does some processing in that it adds an extra field that indicates the data quality code. And that data quality code is based on a series of logic statements that looks at the flags associated with that data. And so Andrew Hill, who's here today, was kind of the person who created that script and who really pioneered that. But what was also important about that, not just adding kind of that data quality code to help people interpret the data better, but it was kind of our first project that automated the movement of data from CEDN to the open data portal, where we could then access the data using the API. So yeah, Andrew?
Thank you. I just wanted to give credit to Melissa Morris. Her understanding of those data flags was critical to our ability to do that. Without her institutional knowledge of how all these data pieces came together, we wouldn't have made any progress. So Melissa Morris is definitely to be included in recognition of that logic that produced that data quality estimator.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it was also a huge team just in OWEMA. David Altair, shout out to him too, because he maintains the scripts now and he does a lot of work with kind of updating it based on our current needs. But it was kind of this grassroots effort. Andrew had this background in Python. He's an expert, a Pythonista, if you will. And I had, expertise in front end. And everybody kind of contributed a little bit of everything. And with that, we were able to kind of get this project up and running, at least have something that we could actually put on our website. So the status on the project is that it's not completely done. It's been handed over to the Safe to Swim network, where they'll actually look at some of the mechanics of how we're doing the calculations, how we're doing the analysis, and whether any of that needs to be changed. But again, I just wanted to repeat that based on your expertise and your background, there's a lot that can be done, a lot of exciting projects to work on, and that's just one of them. So, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, that's a really good example of where your skills, and Drew was excellent to point out Melissa's help, but we also wouldn't have gotten anywhere without a Python coder on the team. And so there's really a lot of opportunities for us and you guys there's unlimited. There's examples of that all over the place. That's the only database that actually ports out a data set with an extra field describing the data quality. We could potentially do it with all sorts of others, and we've talked to other parts of the organization. So there's a lot of sitting down and working through the logic of what the flag codes mean and things like that. So great examples of that. So thank you, Michelle. And Rafa's going to describe some of the, I think I'm talking into two mics. Rafa's going to describe some of the project opportunities he has.
So what Michelle just described involves some coding. And this is really going to be the new normal. It's not an IT function, but we had to have some skills, some data science skills to extract the data, analyze it, structure it, etc. So one of the things I've been working on is it's kind of like a demonstration project. Let me show you what I can do with your data. Let me show you what is possible with very simple skills, not needed to do Python or signing or things like that. Using software that exists today, like Power BI, Tableau, even Power Pivot, in Excel, what you can do with that data. So it's a way of getting people interested in using the data themselves. Instead of giving this to a consultant to build them something, you can actually do it yourself. So it's about empowering staff, because the key is about, if we want to reach innovation, we had to compete. We had to compete with each other. We had to compete with programs. We had to compete with consultants. We have to compete with IT, with priorities. So that's where innovation plays a huge role. So what I've been doing, I have 250 visualizations of any kind of data you can imagine. I mean, from human resources to budget to water quality. It's like, okay, every day I go and look for some data, and what can I do with it? Oh, I can do this and that. And then I show it to the programs, and I think I share some of these visualizations with some of the team members today. It's just like, I have something about Proposition 1. I have something about TMDLs. I have something about water quality conditions. It may not be perfect. I don't know much about the programs, but you can do it better. And that's really the approach that we're taking. Let me show you what we can do with your data, what you can do with your data.
Yeah, thanks. Can you put that on the table? I'm going to stand here. I wanted to show you real quick also. So a lot of these things are in our slideshow. And this slide deck will be put on the GitHub site. It has links in it. So as you scroll down, here's what Rafa was talking about earlier of showing you. So this is our enterprise world. Oops, wrong button. This is the tuna can diagram. So every one of these little cans represents an enterprise application of some sort. And actually, this isn't all of them. The top level is really the yellow background is the idealized world. Like if all the effluent data could live together, it would live in this can. And if all the documents data could live together, it would live over here in this can. And then the bottom is more functional, what we kind of have. And so, I mean, this is, I don't want to sound too judgy, but this is kind of a window into our somewhat irrational world at times. And then the slide deck is full of all sorts of visualizations, examples of things. So I think I have Safe to Swim map on here. This is one of our data literacy products. Tuva is a really cool thing. We're going to try to expand it, but Tuva is a company that does specialized data literacy with education. They kind of got their chops in school, but now they're doing nationwide education and all sorts of other products. And this is an actual platform where you interact with the data. If this was live, you would essentially be able to chart different things, clicking on different variables, and sort of, so it quickly assesses a person's ability to actually create a graph. Like one of the questions could be create a bar chart that has these two variables looking at it or something like that. And so you can assess that. You can also ask questions. So this is an example where it's giving you some data and it's asking you a question. And so this is our data, and it's actually a contextual question, and it's saying which one of the statements or which one of these answers best fits the question. So you can assess their knowledge of things like statistics and understanding of the data. So that's a really cool tool. We have different views of that. We also do a lot of water civic engagement. We can talk about that later. But here's there's tons and tons of links and resources in here. So all of our stuff on data.ca.gov is available here. There's examples of how to access different data sets. We have some tools that one of our staff, David Altair, has been mentioned. He's an engineer that does data science. He has built a series of tools for the stormwater program that were started by a pilot idea in San Diego. This looks at industrial stormwater effluent data that is required to be self-reported, and then it overlays it on top of environmental justice and water quality assessment kind of data layers, so that you can actually use this to prioritize where you might want to do follow-up enforcement and inspections in the San Diego, actually it's statewide, but it was originally meant to be a San Diego tool. There's another tool that looks mostly at just the data. It's not as much of an enforcement prioritization tool, but it's looking at summary statistics for the effluent. So you could say, give me all the facilities of SIC code X, Y, or Z, and all the zinc data, and then it would chart it up, and you could start looking at sort of trends of data that way. So those are tools that David built in RShiny that are scraping data off of the data.ca.gov portal that we have. One of the things that we are trying to do is to champion the state of California's open data initiatives. And so data.ca.gov is run by the GovOps agency, which is Stu and Angie. Shout out to them for the hard work that they've done to sort of make open data a thing in California. But we're really trying to use that because it's the state's open data platform, and why would we want to pay for our own platform when we can use that platform? So we are actually their best customers. So, and then this is an example of Drew's trash tracker in the background. That's a cool computer vision project that you may have talked to him about, but we plan on doing at least 2 computer vision pilots this year, where one is in cannabis and the other one is in trash tracker. We also had hoped to work on OpenET and add a W to it so that it could be a wetlands status and trends tool, because essentially what ET has to do to calculate the consumptive use is subtract out the natural riparian areas that are creating that ET. And so if you're subtracting it out, maybe you could put it in a bucket and quantify it a little bit along the way too. So these are products and projects that we hope to work on this year, and each one of you are welcome to join in them as you can and want to. So the last thing I think I was going to do is talk real quickly about the diagram. This is not a great way to view it. Rosik, do you know how to show this without the hex pattern on the back? See if this works. Nope. All right, so anyway, I can talk about this. We do stakeholder work. That's kind of in our blood at the water boards. We're a board public agency. Every one of our jobs has some element of working with the public probably. And so when this project came along, and Rafa and I sort of architected it into the resolution to come along, we wanted to figure out how do we get engagement. And our traditional ways of getting engagement on our products would be to sort of go talk to our stakeholders, provide some early interest kind of concepts, throw those back and forth, tell them what our boundaries are, we have to do this because of this law or whatever, and then we start revising a draft or drafting a document, and then we put it out for public comment, and then we queue it up for adoption, and then the board makes an adoption. So that's our kind of traditional path. And on a big strategy like this, we would maybe truncate that and not have the big formal adoption. But what we also didn't want to do is have this data touches everyone in the world. I mean, literally, the water data that we deal with it affects people in their residential houses in some ways and their businesses. So we don't really have the bandwidth to do a massive engagement, even though we know that we need to have that kind of connectivity. So we actually sat and dreamt up this idea of having 3 parts of this team. So we have the internal team that's kind of the coaches and managers. That's the people, Rafa and Brent and myself and Michelle and others. And then we have the innovation team, which is sort of a volunteer army, if you will, bad metaphor maybe, but a volunteer group that came to sort of help us. And they represent different parts of the organization. And so, and then we said, well, how do we get that external part? So we talked to Drew and others early on about how do we engage and provide a resource or input so that people like expertise with data or water data science could provide input. So we came up with this idea of creating the advisory panel, inviting all of you panelists to be on that. And there's room for more engagement. So this is why I literally said bring a seat up to the table, because really we want to make sure that people who have an interest in an idea have an ability to get involved with this project. We're going to run this whole project on GitHub. The goal, the arrow at the bottom, the goal of this is really to write a plan. That's the prize that we're going to keep our eye on. I know that doesn't sound super fun, but we're going to write a plan and we're going to start implementing these action projects that are going to do things. And so that's really what the 3 different groups, the OWEMA group, or the coaches group, and the management team, the innovation team group, and the panel, they're all going to try to work on those projects, and then they're going to start implementing them. So I just wanted to explain this diagram. It's in your resources, if you will, if you want to look at it in further detail. And if you have any thoughts or feedback, I welcome that too. So Rosik, where are we in the agenda now? Okay, so we're going to shift gears. First of all, we've been doing a lot of talking. Is there any input, feedback, questions that anyone has around the table? Otherwise, we're going to shift into like the mechanics of how we plan to work together.
Yeah, Greg, can you explain more about the Capstone project? Is that like our own projects?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and actually that is coming up a little bit later too, but I mentioned in some of the meetings, maybe not the one I was in with you, but we really want you to bring a project to this, whether it's a data set that you want to do some things with, or a coding effort that you really want to make progress on, or a computer vision thing. And you know, I know that maybe one of these days we'll actually buy a machine that can do the computer visioning, but those, you know, the Capstone project is for you guys to bring something. This is also goes to Rafa's thing, is we want to make sure that there's something in it for you. At the end of this, you have resources here that would be, you know, paid for. I'll just be blunt. A lot of people would pay for the opportunity to have a seat at the table with some of these data science, water science experts, as well as the people internal. So let's make use of that. Bring some stuff to this team, share it with each other, get feedback, make progress, and then that's what we're calling Capstone Project. Glenn?
Very exciting initiative. It's great to be here. The size of the box. So Rafa talks about competing. I call it diffuse innovation. When innovation occurs everywhere, we all thrive. And the importance of the data here, to your point, it affects everyone, citizens and the. So how do we think about these projects, this effort, relative to everyone else who's not in the room?
That's a really good question. I think, you know, we're bringing proxies for people. We by design, we brought people who have water district representation, folks with academic, Meredith with her massive high-level view and West Coast big data kind of years of experience with engagement. We have hopefully a decent starting point to engage with people's interest by proxy. But we also are not, I'm not eliminating the idea that people who aren't currently sitting around this table can participate. And, you know, like one of the hardest groups, and this is, you know, I'm working on a couple of things on top of all this other stuff that are really fascinating to me, and this is kind of the why I come to work stuff. One is the Government Alliance on Racial Equity, and the other sort of initiative is civic engagement in general. And civic engagement and government and this racial equity lens gives me the idea that there are people who don't get paid to come and sit at workshops and meetings and talk about things, but they have way more at stake than the rest of us. And so how do you provide some sort of way to do that? And it's a constant challenge, but I think you can kind of lean into some of these organizations that maybe they can't sit here for 2 hours in the middle of a Tuesday and talk about this, but they're happy to engage on some of the areas. And we might have to go serve as diplomats or ambassadors of this program, so to speak, to meet with those groups, to talk to them and bring their interest back and figure out some way to engage with them to make sure that this work that we're doing is serving the larger picture and what we really want to achieve at the water boards. So it's a good question, but it's a giant box. You know, one of my management strategies is to kind of like make it seem like it's all really big and we're all going to do this. And then my staff and team always go, Greg, that's crazy how we're going to do this. And so it's a conversation, you know, it's like, okay, we got a little bit too big on that box. Let's kind of, you know, let's make sure we have some discrete bite-sized things that we can achieve with this project too. So I'm very, very sensitive to that as well. And I don't want this to ever seem like it's just a lot of fun talking about it, but we're not going to achieve anything. I'm interested in achieving things. Anything else? Okay, so the mechanics. Do we have slides? No. Demonstrations.
Yeah, and take demonstration lightly, more just like this is what it is. So what we're going to do is just go over 5 pieces of software that are available to the team for use. Not saying that we have to use it, but there are some things that are out there. I know some folks know about them, some don't, so we'll just walk through them real quick. The first one is a piece of software that was introduced to me by the Department of Water Resources. It's called Trello. And Trello is basically a digital version of what historically we referred to as burn down charts. If you've ever seen Silicon Valley, the HBO show, it's great. If you haven't, it's hilarious. You'll see in the first season, they have this board with a bunch of Post-it notes, and they're moving down the board as they complete projects. It's critical to rapid application development. And what Trello was originally was a digital one of these. And you can see that you have digital Post-it notes that go from left to right, starting with some resources and goals, just if you need references, a backlog, which are things that you need to do, an in-progress task column, which is things you need to do that you are doing, and then once you finish them, they move over into the complete row. To the right, you have blockers. That's important, not as important, but sometimes your project gets stuck for a certain reason. It's good to have your blockers there so that everybody can see, hey, this is a problem. It's really easy to bury problems and get your project slowed down or stopped. So in this entire process, the reason that this is valuable for multi-entity teams is everybody can see the board at once. You can take your item, work on it, and move it to the column when you complete it. If you have 20, 30 people on your team, this becomes clutch. In fact, most projects now, I just start with this because even if it doesn't expand, I just get rid of my Trello board. But if it does, at least we have documentation. Drew, do you have a?
Yeah, what would you call this? What is this tool?
Project management software is typically what it falls into. Google Trello and hit images, and you will see people managing their gardens. No joke. Dry cleaning. It works for anything, including software development. So you kind of choose how you want to use it. And that's why we thought it would be a good idea to at least give the team an opportunity to consider this tool, because perhaps there's little sub-teams that form that want to manage something they're working on, or an individual within the innovation team just wants to track their stuff. Maybe that's an option.
So I should preface, we actually weren't quite sure how we were going to do this, but we knew that communication and collaboration was critical. We have 20 hours of the team members' time, quote unquote, and we have, you know, whatever Meredith and the others can actually afford to share with us. We're blessed, so to speak, with all of that. We got to make use of this. And so how do we do this in an effective way so that people are working on things together and keeping in touch with each other and not having to dig through their email box? And so Rosic suggested a Scrum model approach that he's been using in some of his work. And so he's going to be our Scrum master. We then talked to Brent about software that could be useful for doing this kind of an approach for project management with large teams that have to check in on a regular basis. So we came up with Trello and then the next steps too.
That's actually really important, Greg. You know, what is Scrum? So are we talking rugby or software development? Okay, so let's just real brief, just because this is the point where we do that. What Agile is, well, let's say what it's not. What Agile is not is, here's $1 million, I will see you in 1 year, and you will deliver a perfect product. That was referred to as waterfall. Agile is, we are going to build a product with you, product developer, and we're going to do it in small sprints to ensure that every chunk works and meets our needs. That way, at the end of this contract, we're guaranteed a viable product. It's not new. This has been around for a while. But it can be used in more things in software development. So the Agile model was brought up by Rosic. Thought, okay, let's talk about that. So what's Scrum? Scrum actually comes from rugby. If you've ever watched rugby, you'll notice where the two teams lock arms together and they pile up against each other. Basically, every single person on that team is required. You cannot remove one or the thing doesn't work right. That's a Scrum. It's a real fast, high responsibility methodology for doing projects in bite-sized pieces, Agile. You can Google these words and find infinite documents talking about how to do it right and everything else, but that's Agile and Scrum. Trello is a classic Agile and Scrum management software, so maybe that's a more accurate answer. Now, Greg brought up a really important part. Who here's tried to run a project with more than 5 people over 2 years using Microsoft Outlook and a 90-day retention policy? It's very hard.
Ouch, it hurts.
And so this is where Slack comes in. Slack, again, it's not super profound. All it is a bunch of channels where you can have conversations with folks explicit to that channel. So on the OpenET project, there's a Slack channel where the super hardcore Pythonistas are going back and forth on the Earth Engine code. But the project managers don't care. That's jargon to them. So they have their own channel where they can communicate. So Slack and Trello go hand in hand between project management and communication, and even better, the two companies have integrated their software together. Both platforms work seamlessly together. So there's more opportunity. And don't worry about it if you can't find it. It's literally just like chat threads. It's really not that crazy. Definitely better than Outlook for that. The next one I want to bring up kind of came about. It came about a while ago, but it's R RStudio specifically. And thank you guys, by the way. RStudio and then the Shiny and Connect components of RStudio. Shiny allows you to build interactive web applications using R, the language. It's pretty powerful if you're an R user. If you're a Python user, you might use Django, you might use Flask. It's out there. But what we're getting at is that these are free open source platforms. They're already being used. Why not use them for this? The other one is Connect. You can think of RStudio's Connect as basically the publishing portion. If you need to push to another database or you need to publish your data out, Connect can help you do that. Plus, I believe Connect actually parses in Python as well. So we only need one. The next two, you all know about, SharePoint and OneDrive. SharePoint you can think of as a website. You basically make a website where everything is shared from that website. All 20 people go to this one website, all documents are on this one website. It allows you to version, do things like that. Also allows queuing and tasking, where you can set up a document for review and make sure certain people have reviewed it and things like that, versus OneDrive, which is simply a cloud hard drive for you. Now you can share documents out of this cloud hard drive with others, but it's you-centric. And that's a big difference between SharePoint and OneDrive. There's applicability for both, and I think it's up to each person to determine which tech stack they want to use for their particular project.
And then we'll also be tracking a lot of these links on our GitHub repo that I was showing. So the California Water Board Data Center is sort of like a collector for various users within both my team and different parts of the Water Board. So you'll find, if you go to that page, you'll see all the projects that we're working on, the Seedon auto publishing tool, trash tracker documentation. These are some of the other tools that are there. We have a repo built for this project, DMIT. We want to be transparent with the whole world, really, on this project. So we're going to be sharing as much as we can here. This will be this has a wiki feature, so you can use this to sort of like create pages. We want to actually put a glossary page up here. That's one of the first projects, is a common vocabulary kind of a thing. And so this would be a perfect wiki thing, because new terms are going to come up and everyone and anyone can then add and revise them. So put in your request to sort of be a member of this if you're on the panel or team, and I'll make sure that you have the rights to do the editing. What else was I going to say? Wiki or GitHub. The SharePoint is internal only. The Water Board's policy doesn't allow our SharePoint to be accessible by anyone with a different suffix on their email address. So
and share the SharePoint.
Right. So this is why we're doing it this way. Is we could potentially all do this all on SharePoint, but it wouldn't work for people who don't work at the Water Board. So we're trying to create a relatively seamless way to keep track of things. I know it sounds like we're adding complexity, but at some point that's true. But I think so far what I've found with using Slack, for example, on emails, I way prefer it, because you can have quick conversations, check-ins, share files, and find them again when you have shared them. You don't have to search in your massive email inbox. So some of these resources are actually helpful to me, so I'm making them available to the whole team. Any questions on that?
So, I mean, it's probably... of course, happy to see really kind of any opportunities for people at different entities to be able to work together in a way that's manageable, in the sense that they can see everything that's happening. We do something very similar. We don't use Trello, we use something else called Asana, but one of the biggest keys of all that is that they're interoperable. They talk to each other. I guess others do as well. Two things I wanted to bring up also was the ability to kind of at a macro level manage the communication between them. And so we utilize quite a bit a solution called Airflow by Apache. And then also Microsoft itself, which I'm guessing if you clicked on that left corner of your apps on Office 365, you would see a tool called Flow that lets you go and actually do the same kind of task management with things talking to your SharePoint. So you could take Slack or it's not, okay, well, in any case, there might be an explore all of your apps part, but it may be. But in any case, it is something that allows you to go, and even as something as simple as, hey, anytime an email of a particular tag or a Twitter, or if a tweet pops up or some other kind of Yelp review happens, with this kind of text, send an email out of SharePoint task for this particular project. So as you're looking at all the different solutions, there are definitely management tools that get them to even all talk to each other. when those direct connections aren't necessarily already there.
Invaluable resource. Thank you. Any other feedback? Yeah.
Yeah. Regarding the RStudio Shiny app, do you have a server that we can host the apps on?
No, we're working on it. It's in a list of things that we're trying to get approval to do. We'd also like a Tableau server. We actually have put together a white paper that summarizes the business intelligence alternatives that we've seen. David Altero wrote it. It's a really good resource. It kind of runs through JavaScript, Bootstrap, all the way down to Tableaus and Power BIs, and sort of everything in between. And what we've come up with out of that analysis is that we probably need a portfolio approach to BI. We're not an organization that's going to do well with a single solution. Right now, we're being sort of trialed with Power BI. Lots of thoughts on that I can give you offline. But we'll probably need a suite of solutions, including the Shiny server. But for now, one of the resources that's available to water board staff is we have a partner called Southern California Coastal Water Research Project that has a Shiny server that SWRCB has a Shiny server. So, and I'm on the internet telling everyone, but they're probably going to be willing to partner with us a little bit, at least until we get our own capacity up and running. And then there's another state agency, the Health and Human Services Agency and the Department of Public Health has an internal and outward facing Shiny server for a lot of their data visualizations. They're way ahead of us. Water Board thinks we're cool, but Health and Human Services has been doing this stuff for a long time. They've worked through the sharing agreements of all the different health HIPAA data sets and PII and everything you can imagine. So, but they've got a really cool Shiny server that they use to sort of put some of their products both for internal audiences and external. So it can be done at state, so we're trying to explore that.
Great. Thank you.
Meredith.
If you're looking to automate some simple things, if this, then that, if you haven't discovered that, it would be also helpful.
This, then that?
IFTTT, the IoT language. Yeah, so Meredith, do you have experience with that specifically, or do you have a resource that might be able to help us out with that? I think there's great opportunity for IoT stuff in this project. In fact, this is the time. So.
Yeah, even, I do have personal experience with it, but even if you're not using it for anything IoT, if you're just looking for simple things where people are using spreadsheets, whether that's Excel or Google Sheets or whatnot, there are a lot of very easy ways to automate the flow. And so it strikes me as something that the data management innovation team should be looking at. And it also helps promote some transparency because you'd be able to share with somebody, this is what I'm actually automating for you, and here's how you could actually tailor it in an easy way that would be understandable. So going to the literacy and building a fluency across things, it helps people understand from point A to point B what's happening and how it would be helpful for them.
That's really helpful, Meredith, and it's free. And it's pretty easy to use. In fact, Greg, hey, it's working. Look, our advisors have now already advised on new software platforms, and so
go home. We did it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Okay, so next part of the agenda is a facilitated conversation. So if you don't have any questions, we'll ask them of you anyway. We tried to build this up and give you a quick high-level overview. There's way more depth that we could go into about the work that OEMA is trying to do, as well as just the data management insights that were gleaned. But this is a chance to kind of hear from you guys. You'll always be able to ask us questions, but I want to make sure that you guys have a chance to maybe either highlight some interests that you have as participating on this team, highlight a project that you've worked on, share with us some feedback on what you think the water boards could, low-hanging fruit, what was the term, Drew? High-value data integration projects or opportunities. So there are some of those that we know about, but we want to hear what you guys have to say too. Who wants to go first?
Jeff with the Division of Water Rights Enforcement. I'm actually, as of this morning, I have a little more renewed enthusiasm for my project, which I'm kind of right now the de facto curator of all the measurement data that Water Rights is collecting, and it's right now we're just starting to receive the data files from deburgers out there. The annual reporting season is due, so basically my job is going to be to take these various data files, read them, look at them, assess them, and somehow combine them into a single data set. So I think this is perfect timing for that. So that's my project I'd like to bring to the.
Yeah, well, and that project was a data collection effort devised by attorneys. Is probably the easiest way to describe it. It happens all the time. You know, our permits are data collection efforts, and in this case, it's regulations that were required by statute.
Yeah, I think it was they were passed under an emergency regulation, so I don't know how much time was actually spent considering how the data was going to be used and to at least define more how to collect the data. So it'll be a fun ride.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. There's lots of examples of that where people are going to be collecting data, recycle water, all sorts of stuff that's coming in. TJ?
I was partly just taking it back, but I guess I might as well talk too. So there's a few different things that I've tinkered around with in cannabis. One of them is I sometimes act as like help support for Brian over at DWQ to keep our house of cards in one piece without collapsing on the ground. That is our applicant data within cannabis. We have a nice little digital portal that brings data into CWIX, but we're also using that data to then develop our NOAs internally and managing that data without a real structure in place and trying to keep that flowing. And then on the other end, I've been sort of leading a group to develop digital inspection forms. And so moving away from just paper for inspections, but actual, capturing geospatial, geospatially capturing the data for the inspection. So going out there with a device like this and a Bluetooth receiver, and then picking up the points and porting that over into a survey using like Survey 123, and then pulling that data into something else that we can use to then push it into a Word document. And so building those connections is pretty tough. Coming on to the Microsoft Flow, we don't have it yet because they don't have a government license for it yet. It's just for private businesses, not education or government yet. And so I don't know, I think I've made some frenemies at DIT trying to ask for different things. But one of those is trying to set up something like Microsoft Flow to port from our GIS portal where we have the Survey 123 data then to somewhere where I can use it like SharePoint and trying to build that connection. And so stuff that I've done is had automated VBA and actually parse through the HTML script in Survey 123 to grab the data, put it into Excel, and then try to push it into a Word document. So it's sort of it's not ideal. And then that could break at any moment, essentially, as soon as they change the way they've set up their HTML on the website. So
that's innovative.
It was literally like, well, what else am I going to do?
Yeah.
We were talking about different options about trying to push the data across using something other than Flow, and there just weren't that many options out there. Tried to bring it from our GIS portal into ArcGIS Online, and even that didn't work nicely because of the way that we were collecting the data in Survey 123, I guess. So yeah, we're still trying to figure that out for sure.
Andrew, did you have any thoughts about LIMS, for example?
I mean, I could go on really with some ideas, but let's start with water boards, just where I'm at right now with the ELAP. Rafa talked about it this morning. We're working with such an antiquated database right now, but that information that we hold there can be used in so many levels with other agencies. Just thinking about like SIDWIS, when we have a lab that they lose accreditation or they drop accreditation, Are they still allowed to enter data? That's a question that should be answered. And they should be restricted somehow. But how do they know unless we just call them up and say this lab's been, lost their accreditation or whatever? So these are the kind of things that I'm thinking about on my level when we collect our data, or when we investigate a lab, or when we know about a drop to accreditation. How does that translate into other agencies? That's really what I'm worried about. But then on top of that, if I was to consider my private world practice, with the LIMS, how does the data from LIMS of various different laboratories, of various different sophistications, how does that get into our databases? And how is that automated so that the data can be available in a real-time fashion? That would be kind of things I'd want to investigate.
Anyone else on the team have a project idea or some feedback of any kind that they want to share? Lance? Drew?
So this is a kind of a side project that I think is pretty fun, trying to get at that real-time data, having fresh data always. I have a Raspberry Pi, which is just a very small, very cheap computer, 30 bucks. And it connects to our Wi-Fi. You can put it anywhere, and it's really cheap to run. And if I ever need to get data and format it and publish it to Google Sheets, which hooks up to Tableau, anytime you open that Tableau, it's got the fresh data. And so if I need fresh data, this is one way that's really cheap for people to control what data that they're pushing to Google Sheets or to wherever. And it's one way for people to kind of make real-time data happen cheaply and outside of the IT hurdles, which may or may not be approved, but it is a way that people can do this on their own.
Yeah, we talked about the potential with Trash Tracker and building the brain and then deploying it on these sort of like low-tech devices. You could station, the Trash Tracker project was really interesting because it disrupts a bit of thought process on how do you evaluate trash on streets. And there was a group that got together and developed a visual assessment methodology that's human derived, so that you get trained as a human, and then you kind of score blocks of streets based on what you see as that human and based on your training. And one of the challenges of like automating that was how do you make sure that the curb is visible and things like that. So the street sweeper trash tracker idea really came in and disrupted that. And so we piloted it in West Sac with Drew. We got some GoPros, and Drew made a relationship with the street sweeper crew, and we put them on, a couple of them, and we had an SD card exchange protocol that we worked out. And then we built a brain, and the idea is that if you could build that brain and develop the protocols, then cities could do this in conjunction with their visual assessment, because that's the approved methodology, but this would be actual data that they would be able to use to target things, like some of their intervention programs. And then you could take the Raspberry Pi idea and maybe put a camera next to the street pole that's by the liquor store, by the middle school, where maybe some of the trash is gathering, kind of a thing. And you could have a combination of these low-tech sort of monitoring strategies that would not only inform the management decisions, but would hopefully inform my board, who adopted the trash plan with this goal of zero trash in California. So it really starts to add up, and so that's a great example of an opportunity. Lance?
Sure. Oh, yes,
Sorry, I just wanted to say, the 5G network capabilities, it's something that's becoming available. And so if we get these little machines, they're going to have wireless internet access.
They're like little data shuttles.
What's that?
They're like little data shuttles that you could just stick out there, right?
Yeah.
So in addition to, what were you thinking besides computer vision, like putting like probes and sensors and things like that? Yeah, there's partnerships. I think there's a lot of opportunity. The water boards have shied away from this directly, but our partners at SWRCB and SFEI and some of our academic connections, especially with Berkeley and others, there's probably lots of opportunities to develop that. Imagine H2O is another partner that we may be able to sort of deploy and devise some of these things.
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting potential line of thinking and pilot or set of pilot projects. In my past life, I worked on sensors, and I'm more of a hardware person before I got to data. And you could imagine that this team could help pilot and have a sandbox for looking at some of these opportunities where data privacy and engagement with citizen science could have a really interesting role, but is somewhat uncharted territory for some state or local governments to do these sorts of pilots. So to the extent that our network with other groups that are thinking the same things and have potentially deployed and learned from that are helpful, happy to connect.
Awesome, thanks.
One thought too, building off that on the hardware piece, is that especially in the water industry, there's a lot of innovations in hardware, but not necessarily standards across how the data is reported, and water meters, stormwater sensors, open channels. And so I think the hardware piece is a good, definitely a big project, but I think like to make it even more meaningful, looking at standards across
standards, yeah.
how those, like if you're looking at deploying cheap sensors, what's a open data standard for acquisition of that different types of data? What's the metadata associated with that makes it meaningful? Because that helps create a whole ecosystem, and I think that'd be a cool project.
Yeah, the sensors are coming, and the question is, can the government agencies that are going to be asked to make use of that data get out ahead of it with standards and protocols for making use of that data? Not to mention the architecture of dealing with massive amounts of data coming at us from Internet of Things and everything else. But we didn't talk about harmful algal blooms, but there's a lot of work in California, and a lot of these technology sensor innovations are happening in that space where they could be used to help quantify on the ground, as well as a point of use and what have you for people. The purple air movement from last year and the fires in California was a great example of what's possible and what's coming for water. There's going to be probably a similar kind of revolutionary moment at some point where the technology is cheap enough and people have enough of a concern that suddenly a deployment of these point of use sensors is going to happen in the water space too. Lance, you've been very patient, thanks.
No worries. So I originally joined the water boards to help Region 1 with their climate change adaptation strategy. And we've been kind of brainstorming, how do we go about this? Climate change is a huge topic, as everyone knows. And so we have to narrow it down to some kind of mechanism. And we've identified anti-degradation policy. So for those who are not familiar with water quality law, the anti-deg policy states that there's certain types of waters which allow discharge. And the highest tier, the one that has the highest requirements, that is no discharge at all or no new discharge, is called outstanding national resource waters. And so we've been contemplating using an ONRW to give a watershed more protections. And we tried doing this with the Smith River, which borders Oregon. But we received a lot of pushback from the community saying, it's very arbitrary how we designate these water bodies. So the only water bodies that are outstanding national resource waters are Lake Tahoe and Mono Lake. So after receiving comments from the public, we decided to go about this project in a more methodical way. So I guess what I'm working on right now is developing a transparent, open, and replicable methodology to determine whether a water body can meet the threshold to become an outstanding national resource water. And part of that work is collecting data on how other states designate their water bodies. And so far, most states kind of do it in a very arbitrary way. It would start with a citizen group or interested parties saying, this watershed or river's reach has really high quality, has exceptional ecological or recreational significance. It should be an outstanding national resource water, and then that goes through a legislative process. See, nowhere in that is any methodology. It's just a political decision, and I think this is kind of might be pioneering, unless I haven't come across any other methodology to do so. But and so my idea right now is to create an app that kind of lets the public walk through that methodology to see all the watersheds in Region 1 and link this app with all the data sets that already exist and allow them to use the existing methodologies or which we'll develop and kind of come up with their ranking system of which watersheds in our region. And a big component of this project is that what makes an outstanding national resource water is very subjective. You know, what is exceptional ecological significance? What is exceptional recreational significance? You know, and so we want to capture the public's idea of what is exceptional in order to have a feedback loop into this model, right? Yeah, that's the project I'm working on. It's
Cool. Okay, so Rosik has a phone connection by one of our team members. So we're going to do high-tech cell phone to microphone connection here.
Christina, if you want to talk.
Data integration.
Gonna work. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, you're on.
Oh, I might.
You're live, Christina.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi. Okay, I think I must be behind on the watching it because someone was still speaking.
Oh, there's a lag, yeah.
So I mentioned this morning, but I work a lot with GeoTracker and Gamma, the groundwater quality database. And there's a couple of main problems are that the drinking water supply wells that are in the database are not reliably pinned in the correct locations. Is everyone still hearing me all right? Is there any feedback?
Yeah. Oh, we can hear you.
You're doing good.
Yeah, you're doing great. Yeah.
So yeah, that's one thing that I don't know if it's a problem in other regions. That's one question I haven't looked into. I don't know if anyone else in the room is aware whether or not that's the case. But in our region, it is a problem, and I'm not aware of anyone at DDW is working on it. And also, the data tends to be outdated. I'm not sure who it is that's rolling it in from the DDW database into GeoTracker, but that's another thing I'd like to improve on or find the people that can help improve it. And then also enforcement of our own electronic data submittal requirements that have been in place since 2005. Again, in our region, there's been very not consistently enforced, and so there are many sites with groundwater monitoring wells that are not, they have not uploaded either the lab EDF data and or the survey data. So there may be lab data, but it's not pinned to a location and therefore cannot be used for our other studies and modeling that we've been trying to do on a regional level.
That's great. Thank you, Christina. Or Chrissy, as we learned this morning, sorry. Jacob, do you have anything you want to share? Don't need to put everyone on the spot, but I will try at least.
Hello. Yeah, so I work in the water quality assessment unit, and we work to assess all of the data in CDN that we have available every 2 years. And so I wrote this R script that kind of reformats it into a format that we can easily load into our database, but it's pretty much only useful for that, for writing the integrated report. And there's not really any visual component, so it's interesting that R Shiny came up, because just before this, I was meeting with SWRCB about making a Shiny map to improve our visualization, because it's really all we have is exceedances and samples, and that is only helpful for so much. So I'd like to work on developing a map to do that, to help drill down and kind of split the data apart into smaller pieces instead of just the big chunks that we get from CDN. So
that's cool. Thanks. Carmina or Will, do you guys have a preference in order?
So I am in the Division of Water Rights and the Water Quality Certification unit, and we use the FERC docket as our main source of, I guess just news related to the project. And so I'd be interested in somehow like screening what comes in through that FERC docket so that it isn't necessarily on staff to read that short summary on an email, essentially, as our like only way to decide if an important project deliverable has been submitted. And then I'd also be interested in, so when I was with DFA, we used LGTS, which is, I mean, just a database that keeps track of, I mean, there's a short little project summary. You'll input the dates manually for when stuff comes up. Your manager can look, I mean, yeah, it's pretty simple at the end of the day, but we don't have something like that in our water quality cert program. So it would be nice to have sort of just like a centralized database where managers are aware if this report was submitted. We use the S drive, but it's not organized very well. And so if we could somehow come up with something along the lines of what I used when I was with DFA, to sort of just organize our projects a little bit better. So internal is mostly where I'm seeing some room for improvement.
Cool. And we may ask for your help to try, in our interviews, we talked to some of the people in your program, and we learned that not only is there interesting stuff in those study reports that are done as part of the licensing project, but in many cases, the licenses include conditions for ongoing monitoring, and that data might just end up in the docket where it could go to CEDN, for example. So we might use your help on sort of how to reverse engineer and unpack that conundrum a little bit to get use of that data.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Thanks. Will?
This might take a minute, so bear with me.
You have a minute.
So Will Anderson, Division of Water Rights. I'm currently working in the Cannabis Regional In-Stream Flow Policy Unit for the past year. Before that, I was working on the Bay Delta, San Joaquin river flow alternatives. And so the unit I'm working in now was required to, in 2017, come up with a methodology to assess the hydrologic condition for every stream in the state that somebody might potentially want to divert water for cannabis. And so it quickly turned into a big data problem where we were ingesting from all of the known stream gauges that represent some kind of natural flow or, modified impaired flow, but real-time stream flow gauges. And so now there's over 400 gauges that we read every day and decide whether we meet some interim stream flow criteria that are protective so that it wouldn't be any potential environmental impact. But we're trying to develop more kind of robust future stream flow criteria. And this involves assessing the hydrologic condition. Hydrology is so dynamic, like rivers are always going up and down. And so if you look at a data set for one stream gauge for like 20 years, there's a lot in there. And so 400 of these at one time, it's hard to even scratch the surface. And that's kind of the supply side, would be measured flows. Then take the demand side. So we've got what people report that they're using, and to some extent that represents what's actually going on out there. It's not perfect. There are challenges with that. So trying to stack supply on one side, demand on the other side, over long periods of record with gaps in the data, questions about quality, it's hard to even visualize what's going on there. So trying to break that down into kind of a rational process to assess, where are the gaps, where can we actually, we've got to assess all of these streams. So looking at one watershed, that's a question where you can assemble some data and put it in Excel and go through it, or maybe have a simulation model to estimate what might be going on over time. Then looking at every watershed in the state at one time, that's a little more of a challenge. So I'm trying to develop tools right now to take gauge or estimated flow information and on a watershed basis, compare that to what we have in our reported water rights database and kind of make some sense out of it. And it's obvious that there are gaps, but trying to rationally describe what the gaps are and kind of qualify the quality there is a trick. So I'll put another vote in for Shiny Server because I think it's certainly the easiest way that I can think of to get somewhere. I recently, about, I guess a year and a half ago, took a basic R course with software carpentry, and it's like I've been walking to work 5 miles every day and somebody gave me a bike, and now I can, the sky's the limit in terms of what you can visualize. So kind of just doing these fairly simple mass balance relationships for any area based on the raw data source, tidied up, cleaned up, made interoperable in a reproducible, transparent way. It's mind-boggling.
Everything.
I'm really thrilled about it.
Excellent, thank you. It's actually aligns well with an executive interest that I've heard expressed of, water availability analyses in general. The sort of like current model as we push on, I think the people who want to make a request for using water to do an analysis, and so they spend a lot of money and a lot of time to come up with what sort of justifies what they want. But what if we disrupted that and sort of put out a series of different levels of analyses of our own? So here's a quick and dirty for the whole state of California, so to speak. Here's a little more data robust with higher confidence on whatever the outcome is. And then here's, if you want to do it yourself, then go, tier 3 and go do it yourself kind of a thing. So I've heard this expressed at different levels of our executive management meetings. So I think your idea is in alignment with that, and it would be a great way to sort of like provide a digital service, quote unquote, that is currently being fed out to consultants and others to kind of do on their own. How about the panel members? Do you guys have any thoughts? Glenn, I think you got your hand up real quick.
Yeah, and it's not a specific idea, but more of an observation. So I think that the ideas we just heard are a great example of the village, the diversity of the village, and what types of innovation are possible. What I would just stress is, kind of building on your point, Greg, it's not data, right? The goal is outcomes, better outcomes. So if you have data to knowledge to insight to actions to better outcomes, let's think about projects that can tie closely to better water availability or better water quality, right? Because we could fill our entire next 40 years doing really cool tech stuff, right? But, and that's what I do every day, build data tools. So, but there has to be a focus on the outcome, because that's what gives us really the oxygen in the room to do more cool stuff. It's an overarching comment.
Your colleague Dan Hammer was a keynote speaker in this room a few years ago, and he said it really well. He's like, you pay me to do all sorts of software development, I'll do it for you, but making it actually work is kind of like a whole different thing and solve a problem. But yeah, it was pretty funny. Thank you for that, Glenn. Any other thoughts, Drew?
I was just building off the comment you had. I thought that was a fabulous idea, and I think it fits into a lot of big policy areas. But and just taking that to the next level would be looking at every watershed, setting up a water budget with all of the data you have across urban, ag, groundwater. You take the OpenET project in place, and then from each watershed, you could just identify what data gaps you have in the water budgeting calculations. Look at imports, exports, and you basically have an assessment from every watershed, and that would help inform what data needed, not. Because if you have a water budget for every watershed, you basically know kind of the health and what's going on.
So that's a great segue for a partnership opportunity that I forgot to mention. There's also a thing called the Internet of Water that's starting across the country, and I sit on the advisory board of that. And they're looking for pilot cases in California to demonstrate the value of making water data more open and accessible. And one of the other sort of initiatives that's happening, as you probably know about, is USGS has a mandate to do a HUC 12-based water budget approach to the whole country. How they chose HUC 12 and how they're going to do it west of the Mississippi is not clear yet. But But it's one of these things that intersects with Internet of Water and the potential of people in this room that could sort of help. And we could also leverage other resources that are coming to that project, because everyone benefits if we have the ability to sort of provide a water budget or a water balance, depending on your term preference, for different scales. And this year I went to a couple of conferences where stormwater is now, so stormwater was my program for many, many years, and stormwater is now super sexy and hot because of two things. One, people care about trash, and stormwater is trying to address trash. The other one is stormwater as resource projects have really identified this nexus where water supply and water availability is part of that stormwater permitting equation. And so there's a lot of data needs on both those topics that are just sitting there. That could really solve these larger outcome problems or issues that are going to come up again next drought and even before then. So thank you for those examples. Anyone else?
Can I,
yeah.
I guess, feed and respond off of Glenn's comment about the sequence of data to information to insight and then getting toward the outcomes. It seems like if you look at all the tin cans up there, and we're at the point where we're barely scratching the surface of even opening up the data. And as an analyst, I can sit down and look at a small area and provide some insight from that to managers to tell them what I think is going on there. But what I'm trying to do with the supply and demand comparison is open that up so that it's interactive, so that anybody can look at the supply and the demand side and ask the questions on their own of what they want to find out from that, and some of the water quality simulations that we've run that show the temperature of 4 rivers over 20 years and how often that might be habitable for salmon or something like that. That's something that's very hard to present, especially, at a board meeting, a CEQA document that's several thousand pages long, sure, there's a lot of information in there, but how that getting from the information to insight, that's how to make it interactive.
Yeah, so we have a data lifecycle diagram that we use a lot that sort of explains what we're trying to do. Is there's the collection of data at sort of like the first part. This is actually a loop, as you know, but then we store it somewhere. In our case, it's many legacy relational databases that have different acronyms, but they could basically all be called this sort of tuna can shape. And then there's the getting it out of that in ways that are useful, wholesaling the data, so to speak. So this is the flat files and some of the other things that Rafa and others are working on. APIs might be another sort of emerging resource in our world. I know it sounds kind of old-fashioned to most of you, but we actually are working on API connections directly to warehouses now. But flat files services become available, and once they do, you sort of have this blossoming fertilized ground of insights and unlimited use cases. And one of the challenges that we find is having these conversations about use cases as drivers of data. There's really, at the end of the day, two types of people that think, no, you plant the field and the players will come. And the other ones are like, no, you got to design the game and the rules first, and then you get the players to play that game. And so the tension is actually healthy if you keep it in that sort of like equal space. And so we have plenty of use cases. I tell people that we have we make decisions here daily. Right now, right now, somebody's making a decision that is either informed or not informed by the data that we have available. So we are not short on use cases, and we're not short on data that needs to get to that level or stage 4 or stage 3 level of accessibility and open. So it's pretty exciting. Any other thoughts? Meredith.
Yeah, to build off of what Glenn mentioned in terms of outcomes and, what are the interventions, how is this going to make a difference, tracking, what is seeded through this program or boosted through this program and the actual difference that it makes. I think to the extent that you use, the Trello board or other mechanisms to really document the points where you're trying to scale and someone says, oh, we don't have the resources for that, or we don't have the capacity, instead of just letting that drop and moving on, just having a section where you're keeping that bigger picture, because we could collectively ask, how might we tackle that with the expertise and the networks that you've gathered. So I would just say, write that down so we can ask the question, how might we scale effectively later.
So it's the opposite of the blocker column, in other words. It's the parking lot of opportunities kind of a thing.
Yeah, I like that one a lot in particular, Meredith, just because of the fact that in conversation we had earlier today talking about survey forms that we've developed that specifically, we don't want to design the one survey that can answer every single question because no one's going to finish filling that out. But instead, are there 10 or 15 surveys that we're already doing that have different kinds of data points that are fairly common that we can use to inform other surveys? So I don't need to ask this question 10 times. I can ask it one time, and then I know that if I haven't gotten the response from that other avenue, then I'll go ahead and ask the question in this format. Does that data then go and span periods? So is this particular point of data that I've collected, is it good for a year, and I'm asking a month after the fact? Is it something that I can give you a 5-year forecast for, but have annual updates as it goes through the process, just to make the data collection component of this as minimal and as minimize the burdensomeness, I guess, of as it takes to the respondents for the collection part itself. In particular, as you're relating to like field forms and people going out into the field to actually go and collect and harvest data, what are we doing for the technology that they have in place specifically to actually go and not have to say where I am, but my phone tells you where I am. This is again like the Survey 123 tool component of it, but getting that to go and populate other databases. It's a shame that Flow is not something that's necessarily on the table, but there are, like I mentioned, definitely other resources for that. Apache Airflow is one that we use as well, and that will actually go and let you use other kinds of products. We've talked earlier today, and sorry, I'm just kind of rambling through a bunch of points that I made, trying to be respectful of the deadline in 3 minutes, but we talked a little bit about a package called Selenium that lets you go and really just act as though it's you logging into a portal or whatever have you, and get that one data report that you go and click and download every single time. And you can put that into an Airflow flow that will then go and have it go and pull the data and automatically ingest it and upload it to whatever portal that you have. And so that gets to the kind of real-time data point, or at least regular and scheduled data updates, so that you can take the manual intervention step out of it so that you can then free up more time for analysis. And then the last kind of point that I had on there was specifically the like all of the streamflow data, right? The big benefits of that is not necessarily a specific analysis that you're going to do, but make it so that others can use that data for all kinds of other demand-side comparisons to supply. So specifically lowering the bar for academic institutions or other interested parties to be able to access that data and perform the kind of analysis that, yes, if we had armies and armies and armies of analysts, we could do ourselves, but those people already exist somewhere else, so at least make the information a little bit more accessible and usable for them so that you can then go and use that as a use case in and of itself.
So that's a great way to sort of sum it all up. I'm so encouraged. I feel like in 6 months, maybe even sooner, we're going to have a reflection moment of all the cool things that have happened because of this team and the conversations that have started today. So thank you all for being part of that. I want to remind you that this is not just a group that meets and talks about things. It's a partnership of sorts. And so one of the things that we're doing over time is having lots of events that we would love to have you guys help us with. And so July 1 is our annual, and 2 is our annual Water Data Science Symposium. It's going to be here in this room, and it's going to be better than ever. Every year it gets a little bit better and bigger and crazier, and so we're adding on ancillary things. We have the Klamath Room and the Training 1 and 2 as parallel event opportunities where we could technically hack something or do a datathon or do some sort of work on a project that sounds of interest to this group and isn't disruptive to the flow of the presentations. We're going to have Imagine H2O bring some of their partners out into the lobby area here, so we'll have the ability to sort of interface with technologists and people doing sensor work and all sorts of other stuff. And then Cal Data is tomorrow. We're also hosting a Citizen Science Day in the building, April 16th. So those of you who work here and are in the building, look for connection to this data thing because citizen science and citizen engagement is data engagement these days. It's the new way that government has an opportunity to really serve its people. So those are the 3 things that come to mind, but there'll be other opportunities. And so the goal here is to, if you see of opportunities for us to kind of represent, I didn't show the most important slide. I was going to have you guys choose a logo for our stickers. but I'll think of that and I'll send it around and I'll get your feedback. But that's one of the things is this is a cool thing. You guys are part of a cool club now that's starting at the Waterbud board. And so let's make use of that and brand it and talk about it and bring other people into the partnership with us. This is a very collaborative kind of spirit. And I've learned everything I just said from Meredith. So I'm so glad that she's a part of this team. So, and there's actually playbooks for how to do this. So we can actually share those playbooks too. So thank you all. We've finished right on time. The people in the room, we can keep chatting, but we're going to close down the webcast now. I want to thank everyone online and thank the people in the audience that have sat through and listened to this. And I look forward to seeing all sorts of cool stuff happen. So thanks.